1 minute.
FRS.
Oh yeah, I got your.
And DCD.
Yeah.
That would be a good article. You know, you do a good job on articles like that. So I sent you that article. That's one that was in the Leon County paper talking about what's happening. And of course, I think we need to spread the word on that because
You guys gonna get screwed on
we're going to get screwed on everything.
Oh, yes. Big time. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Workshop to order, please. First, Dr. Vogel? Can you not hear me?
I can hear you.
No.
You can't hear me.
Oh, you know what? Maybe it's only that mic. That's.
Dr. Vogel?
Come on up.
This mic is on.
There you go.
Can you hear me now? Okay. I've been calling the meeting to order, but come on up.
Here though.
Come on up.
Do you want to come over here? You need more space.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're ready to go ahead. Sorry. Thank you. We just met with some of your team members, and I'm here today with John Reichert, who works with us and Andrea on our search. And our first agenda item is the search timeline. And we're going to go ahead and start working through that. I just want to thank Kathy. She prepared an outstanding book look for board members that has all the items in there. We'll continue to add to it as we go through the process. So John's going to start working through the timeline. We realize we have a time constraint because we have another meeting coming up. We think we can get finished with that time. Okay, John?
Thank you, Dr. Vogel, and good afternoon, Board. You should have in front of you a timeline that has at the very top revised 3/3 of 20 in little red numbers.
Yes.
At the very top of your timeline.
Yes.
Again, the February 4th activities have passed us. We're here today to review and approve the timeline once we kind of run through it and get your input and suggestions. We'll talk at the end about the advertisement venues that the board would like to advertise the posting within. And we'll discuss a little later on some salary qualifications and contract terms and kind of get the board's feedback on that. The community forum, we do have some community forums set and established in this timeline. And I think I'd just like to kind of run through the whole timeline and then come back with some specific issues. And then at the end, we'll talk briefly about the search brochure, which we discussed with some of your staff earlier prior to this meeting. Our timeline calls for March the 9th, a press release, and we did talk with your press person this afternoon. The press release will more or less announce the community forums because we feel we need to get that out as soon and quickly as possible through as many avenues as we can to inform the public. The press release will also talk about the online survey that will be available for your staff to complete one survey and the community to complete a community survey. And we also will announce the superintendent search website portal that will be on your home page, and we've talked with your staff this afternoon, and they're kind of preparing in advance for that web portal to be available. March the 12th is our goal to have the website portal up and online, and the online survey active so that the community can access the online survey and complete it, and we would have already sent out the survey for staff. March 23rd, begins our community forums at Booker High School. We have another community forum, a community forum scheduled for March the 24th. One would be a staff forum at Riverview High School, and then followed by a community forum at 6 o'clock. So the staff forum would be at 4 and the community at 6.
What will be done at these forums?
Okay. We have a protocol which we use. What we like to do is, as people are coming, normally a board members would come to a forum, and they could just welcome people that are there. And then we like people to divide up into tables. And then we work on what are the strengths of the district, what are the challenges facing the district, and what qualities and qualifications would the people there like to see in their next superintendent. And
Is that something you want board members at, or you don't?
well, we like board members to introduce to come. They're usually welcome, and then normally board members will leave after that. They're
Shirley,
welcome to stay if they'd like.
punch in. Hold on. Mr. Robinson?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought we were going to go through it all and then come back.
I thought so too.
So if we're going to talk about it stuff, when will we approve the questions in the online survey? We got the list.
Right.
I said which ones I wanted. I don't know what, because Sunshine, we haven't seen what other people.
Right.
So at what point will the 5 of us be able to discuss what we put in for the online survey and what those results were, and when will we be able to approve that?
Okay, we're gonna talk about that. We have an agenda. Mrs. Tompkins did a really nice job of getting all the input from all the board members, and we've combined all those. And then what I did is, I came here early and I went through and I looked at all of the revised recommendations the board had, and and some of them were similar, so I culled some out, and I also added some that I didn't see in there that I knew we had talked about at our last meeting. So we have that on the agenda. We're going to talk about that.
Okay, so we are going to see that.
Yeah, we're going to see that
Okay.
tonight. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me take this. Okay. I'll give it to you. So, John's got to finish up here just a view of the timeline. Make sure we're all right with the timeline first, then we've got all the other items to go through.
Okay.
Okay, so after our Riverview High School Staff and Community Forum on March 30th, we'll have another Staff and Community Forum at Venice High School, 4 o'clock and 6 p.m. Respectively. Then March 31st, we'll have a Staff Forum and Community Forum at Northport High School. And then April the 2nd would be the date that our online survey closes. And that online survey, the next day, your IT folks will provide a summary of all the input that came in from the online surveys, both staff and community, and provide that to the board for your review. Then on April the 7th, we'll be back here to really take all of the input that we received from the 4 community and staff forums, and also from the online survey, and work with the board to finalize the qualifications, the characteristics, and the qualities that you would like to have, so we can then prepare our ad and finalize the brochure to get ready for ads to be posted on April the 9th. After the 9th, we have on April 21st a board work session to talk about the Community Advisory Committee membership. If you recall, last time the board did have a Community Advisory Committee that really acted in the capacity to screen all the applications to get down to a number of, and I'll just kind of make this number up, 8 to 10 candidates to send forward for the board's further consideration. Certainly understanding the board can add anyone to that list that they would wish to. Then our advertisements will close on May the 8th. And then we have our first of 2 Citizens Advisory Committee meetings on May 14th and May 21st for them to complete their job of screening the applicants. And in the middle of that, we have another board work session to kind of begin talking about the selection of semi-finalists, the finalist selection, and also the interview schedule that will provide the board with samples of that interview schedule for discussion at that May 19th meeting. After the second Community Advisory Committee meeting on May 21st, the 22nd, we will submit their recommendations forward to the school board electronically. And then on May 26th, we would have the meeting in which the board would identify semifinalists. It was our understanding the board did want to identify semifinalists before they identified finalists.
Yeah.
And that meeting to identify the finalists will be June 2nd. And then our on-site interviews would be June 17, 18, and 19, with basically the 17th being a day for out-of-area candidates to arrive in Sarasota. And then after those interviews on the 18th and 19th, then the board would make their final selection on June 22nd.
Mrs. Brown?
Will there be a chance for the community to meet with the finalist interviews?
Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry. If I could give you a quick review, on the 18th of June, we basically have kind of a round-robin concept that the board would sit, say, at 8 o'clock that morning to interview candidate A. And while candidate A is being interviewed by the board for an hour and a half, the other candidates will be doing school community tours. And then when one of those school community tour candidates finish up, then they would come in to be interviewed by the board, while the first candidate the board interviewed begins his or her school community tours. So it really will run from about 8 until about, depending on the number of finalists you have, it'll run from about 8 in the morning till maybe about 3:30 in the afternoon, with the board having their one-on-one interviews with each finalist while the other finalists are doing school community tours. That evening is where we'll have the open come one, come all community reception at a designation that the board would probably select in kind of the center of the county so we can get as many folks there as possible. That evening, after the community kind of mingles with the candidates, we'll have an avenue for the community persons to provide their input or reflections on the candidates from that evening. We'll compile that night and provide it to the board electronically, that input from the community. So as you go into your one-on-one interviews on Friday, which would be the 19th, you'll have some feedback from the community from that evening before. So Friday is your one-on-one interviews with each finalist, and that usually begins around 8 or 8:30, and you'll culminate around 2:30 or 3 at the latest, depending on the number of finalists you have.
Thank you.
Last time we had it at
Miss-
Riverview High School, and I think the cafeteria was packed.
Yes,
It was a
it
great
was.
turnout right there, so,
Yep.
that was a good location last time.
Mr. Robinson?
So when I was looking at the online community forums, survey, and it seemed more like almost a personality profile of somebody, the qualifications. It wasn't asking me stuff like how many years of experience, how many, it was more like what soft skills do you want the person to have, and then I started thinking, well, these are the soft skills I want the superintendent to have. But then it was like, okay, then how am I going to find out if that person what's the best chance of being able to find out if this person really has soft skills? Because in my office, every time I interview somebody for the front receptionist, every single person says they're a people person, and everyone's not. So I was thinking, is it possible for us to find time within the schedule to either in the semifinalists or the finalists to do a personality test, to come up with some criteria so that we can evaluate? Because if we're going to be doing a community survey for all these soft skills, this personality test will help us determine whether the percentage likelihood that they may have these soft skills, or you may have a personality test and find out that they are diametrically opposed to the list that the school district wants. And I think the best way of finding that out ahead of time is through a personality test.
We are very open for that. What we'll do is,
Well, you got to talk to the other.
right, we're open for that. If the board would like us to look at that, I know Mrs. Messina has done some work on that. What we would want to do is work with your school board attorney to make sure whatever is used is appropriate. But we have an open mind to that if the board would like us to look at it for another meeting.
Okay. Mrs. Ziegler?
Thank you. And I was queued for some timeline stuff, but I agree, and I like that idea that Mr. Robinson just mentioned, just because when you do read through some of these, well, honestly, if you just think about in a lot of high-level positions, they do in fact do those personality tests. And that was my question, is this survey, a lot of these are important attributes, but how are we going to confirm that applicant actually possesses these qualities? And that's in a variety of ways, right? You can have, what their past history is, references, but especially because you're working with a dynamic board, I think that, and that's probably likely all the way, but that would be something that would be really valuable to see how that person would not only achieve these key elements, but how their personality, because you can achieve certain things but have certain character traits that can be
Yes, and what
positive.
happens normally, interpersonal skills is one that's really important, but normally the way that comes out is when the committee is doing their reference checking, they're calling people in the districts. And then oftentimes we get information from teachers associations, for example, they're always checking. And so we can really nail that down because that's one that, is really important.
Follow up, Madam Chair.
Sure.
But the personality test is something, if the board would like, we certainly can investigate that further.
Well, I definitely like the idea. I think that, and it's a piece of the puzzle. You don't weigh all of it on there. And then I'll just go back to my initial comment was some of the timeline, and I know I said this before, I understand that we don't want to keep this open forever but I want to make sure it's an effective process. So my first question was on the advertisement posting to closing as a month. Is that a standard timeline?
I think usually the standard timelines for us have been around 6 weeks, so we are about
Compressing
a week
it.
or two shorter. But I will say a lot of the other state associations, their standard time is about 4 weeks for posting.
Okay.
But however, if the board wanted to consider adding a week or two, it might mean that we might have to take the end of it.
And then that was probably one of my least worries. I think, honestly, if you leave it
Okay.
open for too long, we could lose really good candidates to somewhere else. So was just curious about what your standard practice is.
Right.
And then, but the Citizens Advisory Committee part is, if I recall back when we did this last time, we had 49 applicants. I remember spending my weekend on my living room floor reading through all of them. And so that timeline, to be fair to the individuals and for it to be meaningful, not just people are already reaching out to us. People are very passionate and who want to participate in this process. We need to be fair. They also have other lives and things that are going on. So being fair and to it being a thorough, effective process, my concern is, especially if you just mentioned they would be calling, so not only are they reading through that, but they're also calling and following up. I honestly don't believe that those 2 days is a realistic time frame.
Okay. I will say, I think the board has indicated that they would like the applications to come through FSBA.
Okay, yeah, right.
So when other districts have done that, the applications come directly to me, and I'll kind of jump out of the agenda and talk about the application
Okay.
process.
Sorry, but no, yeah,
So
going on
if the board,
timeline.
for example, would approve that you would like to have each applicant submit a current cover letter, current updated resume, 3 references, no more, no less, because some folks try to overload on references, and a copy of their transcripts for the highest degree earned. So you'll basically be requesting 4 documents. They come to me through my email address. I then will take each one of the applications and I will arrange in a PDF. The first document will be the cover letter, the second document, the resume, the third would be the 3 reference letters, followed by the last item of the college transcripts. I'll put that into one PDF, and as soon as I do that, certainly that becomes a public record. And what I would do for the very first one, at the end of each week, that the advertisement process is ongoing, I would send a copy of that to the board's clerk and also to be posted on your website. As soon as the advisory committee is identified, in other districts, have sent those same resumes to your advisory committee members electronically, so they kind of get a jump start on the process. That has helped with getting, when you have large numbers, and I would agree, it is really an overload to get on your first meeting a notebook that's this thick with 45 or 50 that you need to review by within 7 days and get back. We can look to, I can certainly go back to the drawing board if we would like to have that third meeting and really try to find some time in here to make 3 meetings for your advisory committee.
Thank you.
Because I think, John, what I'm looking at here, the advertisement's posted April 9th.
Right.
Okay, and then the board, the Citizens Committee is going to be finalized April 21st. So what would happen is, as soon as the advertisements start coming in, then the Citizens Committee would be getting those advertisements.
Basically starting April 22nd.
22nd.
That's plenty of time.
Are they're board sanctioned committee, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Right, just so we just, and I, again, you'll have to refresh my memory. When we did it last time, did we have it in, I mean, because there's sunshine rules and not everyone's privy to that, we just had our first one. I wasn't there, but I'm assuming, I don't know, Mr. Hardy, if you were there or sent a memo or such to inform them of those rules. I just, again, want to do this properly.
Right. What a lot of the districts' boards have been doing is on the night that the board finalizes your Citizens Advisory Committee membership, the very next morning, legal counsel would send an email to each of those members and say, here is the quick down and dirty on sunshine.
Okay.
And we'll be at the first meeting to talk more in detail.
Okay.
And that has really worked well to kind of notice those members that as soon as the board kind of hit the gavel the night before, you're now in the sunshine.
So they understand anytime they discuss it, anything of that
Yes.
sort? Okay.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, continue.
Okay, good. Any more questions about the timeline? Does this look like it will work for the board?
I think it's a great timeline. I noticed you've given us a couple of extra weeks at the end, which we didn't have before.
Correct. Yes.
Would the board like me to try to squeeze in a third advisory committee meeting?
I don't think so. I don't see the need for it. I don't know if anybody else does.
I personally, I just don't think there's any. It's very. I worry again. I'm not trying to draw it out unnecessarily, but I don't want it to be. I mean, this is arguably the most important position in the county, and so I just want to make sure. I don't want to drag it out, but I do want to make sure that it's done thoroughly, and there's no room for error. I mean, here essentially. So that's my worry, especially as we consider posting the interviews and such. So I have concerns about the timeline in general. I think we could add a little bit more of a buffer. That's my preference, but I'm just one board member.
Mr. Robinson?
I hope they can do it within 2, but I think that Mr. Vogel should pencil in a third meeting somewhere. And so then if Mr. Vogel thinks that it needs, after having 2 meetings, if Mr. Vogel, at his sole discretion, thinks it needs to have a third, then have a third. But if Mr. Vogel thinks he can wrap it up in 2, then do it in 2. But, I mean, this timeline is what I would call aggressive. Hopefully it's doable, but,
It's still.
I mean, this is an aggressive timeline when you compare all the other FSBA timelines to all the other superintendent searches that have been done. So, I mean, this is an aggressive timeline, but hopefully it's doable.
Well, thank you. I mean, board members, if you would.
Is that okay about what I said about the community meetings for you, Mr. Vogel? Do you find, is that something you could handle?
Yes, but if the board would like, we could push everything back for a week, if the pleasure of the board is to do that.
Hold on.
or the tentative.
on.
If we get, we would,
Jay.
what we'd have to do is have one, we could put one in, but it wouldn't be a week in advance. Okay, John, we could,
Well, let everyone speak before you make changes.
Yeah, okay.
Dr. Vogel.
yeah, okay. Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Goodwin.
Well, I think that we could put it in as optional and leave it as optional. And if we, I don't know if there's anything else that we need to put in as optional. But, there's sometimes that things work out one way and then
Thursday.
and then it doesn't. So I would say put in 2. And then if we require a third, make that an option, but it's not a have to have. I'd like to see the timeline stay as close to this as possible because we're getting ready for school to start.
Yep.
And I think, there are many things that are important to us this year, and our new policies that we have in equity. And, we want our superintendent on board for all those great, exciting things that we'll be doing the first of the school year. And if we don't have something
The board meeting.
tangible by, the end of July,
Let me just.
we're starting school the beginning of
August.
So I think this is perhaps aggressive, but not terribly. And I just say if there's some issues with 2 versus 3, have a third as an option, and then if we need it, fine. If we don't, we don't.
John is the master calendar guy,
No.
and he's got a,
Oh,
got an option
okay.
for us within the same timeline, at the end. Go ahead.
We could potentially, where you see May 26, which is a special board meeting to select the semifinalist, we could have May 26 as a optional third meeting of advisory committee if needed, and then have a special board meeting on May the 28th to select your semifinalist. So if needed, the advisory committee could come back on a Tuesday, finish their third meeting. They would certainly have by that time 8 to 12 names to submit forward. We could do that on the 27th, and then the board would meet maybe on that Thursday, the 28th, to select the semifinalist.
Could you repeat that, please?
I'm sorry. Our second advisory committee meeting is on May 21st, which is a Thursday. We could take the May 26th, which is now on your calendar as a special board meeting. We can make that the advisory committee third meeting if needed, and then have your special board meeting on May 28th to identify the semifinalist. That would just give us a very short window to get the test done that we were talking about, or have them respond to questions, and the board would come back on June the 2nd or 3rd. We could change that date a day or two to select your finalist.
Okay. Mrs. Brown.
I like the June 2nd date. And I know we don't want to wait too long from when we have our interviews until we choose our finalist. So it's like, do we do it the 17th, which is a Wednesday through a Friday, and then we get information back? I would think that we would want to make that decision after we interviewed them rather quickly. I'm thinking maybe if we did it the 15th or the 17th instead of the 17th or the 19th, but, I think we, when do we get the feedback from what the community says on the 18th?
Wait a minute, it's in
The
here.
advisory committee?
No, well,
The community feedback.
the community feedback.
The forums? Okay.
When the community meets with the superintendent, the candidates, the 3 finalists,
That evening.
so they're going to meet on the 18th.
Right.
And then we're going to have the interviews on the 19th, and then that's a Friday night, and then we're going to come back on Tuesday and make our decision.
Yes, ma'am.
So when do we get the feedback from what happened on Thursday night?
Your Thursday activities are your one-on-one interviews with the board. Then Thursday night is your community reception to meet the finalists. That evening, we will stay and send you the public input that evening before we leave. So you will have it Friday morning as you go into your one-on-one interviews, and there may be some reflections that were provided by the public that you would like to address in your one-on-one interviews.
That's going to be a fast turnaround for us. So
Yes.
the meeting is going to be from what, 6 to 8?
Yes.
And then we're going to start our meetings at 8:30 in the next morning?
Yes, ma'am.
So we're gonna start you off at 7.
I mean, is there any way they could meet on the 17th so that, we had some time to read them?
You could have your community reception, if you wished, on the night of the 17th.
If at all possible, I would like to be able to have time to read what the community said.
Okay. We certainly understand it is a tight turnaround, but a lot of that community input, I think some boards have looked at as they make their decision the following Tuesday of selecting the superintendent.
Okay.
Right, because all you're doing when you get the audit data, it's not like you have to make a decision on it the next day. That's just input for your questions. And then you'd really have till the 22nd to look at it all.
Mrs. Ziegler?
Again, I go back to, I see your point. That does not necessarily, I'd like to read them, and, but I recognize what you're saying, that could participate into our final decision. Again, I go to, from a best practices standpoint, because that's why you were hired, is that a typical turnaround time that you're seeing? That's one day.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah, we haven't had any board provide, any concern about getting.
Okay. No, that's fine.
And in fact, one of our searches, they're going to actually have people use laptops to record when they go out, as well as paper. So that, when they leave, they can go online. We're going to try that too. So
Right.
I'll see that.
Yes.
Madam Chair, if I could, maybe one solution to give us another week. If you will look at June the 2nd, where the board meeting is to select your finalist, we could move that to June the 9th, or we could have a special meeting on June the 8th. No, ma'am, that's a conflict, that's right.
It's a conflict.
What is,
June 8th and 9th, I'm out of the country.
I'm sorry.
That's good.
Okay.
I think better leave it as it is. Mrs. Goodwin?
forgot what I was going to say now. I
want to say you agree with me.
I was going to say that orange smells really good.
It does.
I was going to say that as far as the questionnaires and so forth go, any way that we could automate that, I think, is a good thing for you and for us. But I think, we ought to be able to get through those as we're doing the interviews the next day. If I can remember, a lot of people are not going to write a dissertation.
No.
They're going to write a one sentence, many of them comment or say, I think this person would be great or that. So I think it's, kind of that sort of thing is what I've seen is a shorter rather than longer.
Yes, ma'am, you are correct.
Yeah.
We're going to make this an alternate date if needed.
Okay.
Well, we can't until we can finish this timeline,
The
surely.
board's going to have to meet here.
Yeah.
The 28th?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Do you want to read that timeline one more time?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Just that one.
hold on 1 minute. Mr. Robinson.
Yeah, I one of the main reasons that I did with FSBA was because of you, Dr. Vogel. And so I just want to make sure you have the autonomy to make sure this gets done right. Because as this one board member, I know there's some board members who want to get this done quickly. Personally, I want to get this done correctly. And so I want the correctness to be paramount, to be number one. I want to get this right because we know what happens when we get it wrong. And that is more damaging to the district than whether the superintendent starts on July 1st or July 3rd. So to me, I know you can do it, Dr. Vogel, but I just want to reiterate this publicly. My desire is to get it done correctly, not quickly.
I think that's all of our desire to get it done correctly. However, I do understand that the superintendents, the good ones, will be snapped up. And at the end of June, when we begin in July, we really should have an idea of who the superintendent's going to be. Go ahead, Dr. Vogel.
One thing that it's not my decision when committees finish up after the second meeting. The committees decide if they need the extra meeting. I appreciate your confidence you have in me, but what John has this. If we add that date in, we have the option for the third meeting. So, John, why don't you talk about that? I think that will
But
take.
you're going to be at the meeting. You're going to.
Right. Well, we'll be at the meeting, and we'll know. Right, definitely we'll be there. But they might say, well, we need one more meeting, or we don't need another meeting. But I appreciate the confidence you have in us. But John's suggestion here provides that as an option, and all we need is just one more date for the board. Right, John? We change one date
Right.
for the meeting.
As I'd mentioned earlier, I think if you take the current May 26th date that's set as a special board meeting to select the semifinalists, we can put that as a potential third meeting for the advisory committee, and then move the board special meeting to May 28th.
Could you explain to me what the purpose is of selecting semifinalists? Then the next step is selecting finalists with nothing in between. I don't understand. Why don't we just select finalists?
Some boards make that decision, but
I'm trying to understand why. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just trying to understand why. What is the purpose?
Typically, boards that select semifinalists will prepare 3 to 4 questions that they will send to each semifinalist and ask them to provide a written response, no more than 1 page, to each of those questions within 3 days.
Oh, I didn't see that in here. I'm sorry.
No, sir. Well, that,
No.
No,
We did we do that?
I
No.
thought we did. I'm
I
remembering
don't remember that.
That's what I'm thinking.
Or we
So-
prepared
so-
questions they had to
So we're gonna prepare questions once we get the semifinal. When are we gonna prepare these questions, and when will they go out? And when will they be back? And
that's
I
it.
didn't see that in my timeline sheet.
no, it is not. That's if the board elects to have semifinalists.
But we
Go on
have
here.
semi-
Well, do we want semifinalists?
I don't know. I'm trying to understand
Well,
why.
last when we met last time, I got the impression the board would like semifinalists, and I would recommend semifinalists.
That's
because
good
I
enough for
think
me.
We're going to have a sizable field to look at, and it may be very hard. The committee is going to bring you recommendations for people that need to continue on in the process. They are not semifinalists. When you get that list from the committee, then you can either say these people are semifinalists or cull that number down if you want, or add. So that's why we put that in there.
Mrs. Brown?
I would like for us to keep in mind that, we're going to be putting a survey out soon, and I think we need to be getting into that issue rather than continuing in the weeds on the survey, on the timeline, because there's a lot that we have to do, and we've spent 40 minutes so far.
But we need to get this right.
Of course we need to get it right. But there's a thing about going on in the weeds, too. We've got an idea here of where we want to go. We can change the date in May, in April, if we need to.
Right.
But if we're going to be putting a survey out, we're not going to be meeting before we do that. We need to be getting that together.
Can we just add a time to do the questions like they mentioned, and then?
Mrs. Ziegler?
No, I was just gonna say I'll be brief to her point. But if I agree with semi-finalists. I recall we did questions or something similar.
Right.
So can we find a way to build that in, and then to Mrs. Brown's point, move on to some of the additional
Yeah, we'll
questions?
do that. We have that in.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing now, Mrs. Zucker, is it a consensus that we add that third meeting as an optional if we
Yes.
need it and move that?
Yes.
Optional.
That's what I'm hearing.
That
Yes.
sounds good. We'll put that down, and then we'll see how the meetings are going, and we'll go from there. But I think one thing is going to be different is getting when the applications come through FSBA, and John, the committee members will get them sooner. They'll get them they'll have a lot more time. It's not like they all get them at one
Right.
time. They'll start being able to start reviewing because they'll all be on Sunshine, so we'll be squared away on that. Excellent. Okay, we're going to make that one change then, and then we'll send that out from there. Okay, we're going to run through the next items are going to go kind of quick, and John's going to talk about the website portal content. We talked with Mina, and then we'll get to the surveys, which will be the majority of the time.
Right, the website portal, which will kind of be your place for the community to go to keep up with the search, keep up with the processes and the activities that are going on related to the search. You'll see under your superintendent search website portal suggested components of that portal. We recommend all press releases, any links to meetings such as this workshop would be available for the public to look at. The timeline is also very important to keep on this website. The community forum dates, your online survey links, the Community Advisory Committee minutes of those meetings, the search brochure, and again, as the applications come in, each application that comes in, that's a complete application. When I send it to the board and the advisory committee members, we'll post it to that web portal so that your community can see what quality of applicants and the numbers that are applying for the position. When you identify your semi-finalists, we will put that up as well. So those are some recommended items that we would suggest that would be on your website portal.
Madam Chair.
Sounds good.
And that's on, and I may have missed this, that's on you build that, or is that our team building it?
Your team builds it. We talked with Mina today.
Okay.
And it'll be just like when you open your website under school board, you'll be able to, you'll click on it right there. It'll have everything lined up for you.
Right. Superintendent Association.
Okay.
How come that's not on this?
Okay.
Okay, next, advertising venues.
The advertisement venues, you should have a page in your packet that lists all the, yes, sir.
Why isn't the Florida Superintendent Association listed here?
It will be, yeah. The Superintendent's Association,
Yeah.
we actually hand that out to all, the brochure out to all of them, but we'll make a note to do that. Andrea sends that out to all the superintendents of the state.
Right.
Personally.
But do they have listings on their website for? If they do, can we do that? If they don't, then no. I mean,
I don't believe FADS does.
FADS doesn't.
Might.
FADS doesn't.
FADS does not post those on the website. They stay kind of on the side when it comes to superintendent searches.
Okay. It just seems like a fertile ground to.
There's too many people coming from other districts and.
Yes,
Right. But what I do when I go to the FADS meetings, I'm fortunate to be able to go to them. I take the brochures and I put them out on the table.
Okay.
And everybody's calling me already about it. Anyway.
Okay, so from this advertisement page that you have in your packet, our successes and really the productivity we found to come certainly from Ed Week, which is the top school jobs posting, the American Association of School Administrators. We just started using that recently, and that provides quite a few. FASA, they have a site to post, and we will post there. The National Alliance of Black School Educators, we feel is appropriate so that we can look to
Yes.
have our a diverse field of applicants. And also at the very bottom, the Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents. So we think those 4 or 5 sites are a good representation to get nationwide candidates and applicants, along with all the associations that Ms. Messina is connected with. She advertises within those associations at no cost. And then, of course, we send it to all the superintendents in Florida and board members as well.
Mr. Robinson?
So, these are great people, but some of us on the board really like superintendents who have Florida experience. So, am I correct that FASA is the only one that's Florida-centric, and the other ones are national groups, or are any of these Florida-centric?
Well, I would say that when Andrea sends it out to every current superintendent in the state, so they actually get the brochure or they get the posting on it.
Well, I just didn't know if there were other Florida-centric places that you could advertise,
Fast.
in addition to, not in replace of.
Yeah.
No, that FASA probably is your primary, and I don't know of any other site to do that.
Okay.
And just
There are a lot of
information,
people who are a member of these associations in Florida.
we did
With the Florida
actually,
Governmental Finance Association.
we can set it, yeah, we can get that word out.
Yeah, we'll put it on our website.
Yeah. We actually did a webinar.
CFOs make good superintendents.
I'll agree with that one. We actually did a webinar with FASA for people that were interested in applying for superintendent. We didn't know who was on there, but we did that too. So we really try to get the word out. I think we do a word with that.
Okay.
Okay, and on April 7th, we'll go ahead and meet with your team, and we'll post all these up, and get these all on out. Okay, the next one, application process, I think we've talked about that.
Right.
John's got that. Salary and qualifications. I don't want to spend any more time on that right now because you've received all of the latest salaries from all the districts in the state. We talked about last time about maybe 195 to 255 or 245, but we're not going to decide that tonight. You all decide. We'll do that in April. We'll decide that in April. The other thing is we want to hear from the staff and the community as far as the qualifications. So we're not going to spend any more time on that. You all have the qualifications that we utilized the last time.
We do.
So just be looking through that. Okay, the next one is the community involvement review. We handed out a sheet the last time, and what I will do is I think the only thing that was not on that sheet, and I think it's in your packet under community involvement, was I've got to go back to the survey, was the fact we're going to have a staff survey also. And I want to talk about that first. And I'll talk about the other surveys too, because I know that the board usually sends out an annual survey.
Yes.
Okay, and the timing for that is I think, I talked with Kelsey, normally is about this time of year, and we don't want to overload surveys. Right, so if you, maybe the survey could be later, and our surveys are back April 9th, I believe.
Survey.
Our surveys are back when?
April 2nd.
April 2nd. So maybe if that survey could be after our survey is done later in the year. So that, because I just don't, but I'm open for what the board wants to do on this. You see what I'm saying? If you have that survey go out and then you have our surveys out, there's a lot of surveys out.
The climate survey also involves parents, correct, at the school level. So it's not just staff. It also involves,
What are the dates for that?
It's supposed to go out mid next week.
It's too soon for us.
March is fine.
I would keep it.
So
keep it as
you have your survey scheduled to go out April?
March 12th.
No, now. You're having it.
March 12th. March 12th.
12th.
Now, our survey is
Same time.
posted on the website, so the community would be encouraged to go onto the website. Now, the staff survey would be one that we talked with your team. That would be a little bit different. It could be either sent out an email blast to go onto a site to a separate site to go ahead and fill it out, or it can be sent out to everybody too. You can send an email out to everybody and do that too. But there's a lot of surveys out there.
Agreed. But I think I guess it kind of depends on how big the questions become. If
Right.
it's relatively short, I think the staff would be quick to complete, because they do want to provide, they should provide their input on their next superintendent, absolutely. So it's ultimately up to the board But if the number of questions are short, I think you could get responses pretty quickly
Yep.
and still keep the climate survey as scheduled. So if that would work for everybody.
Yes.
I got some okays in the back of the room, so that was good.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's separate. I think, yeah.
Okay, good. And now, the surveys that we recommend have open-ended questions, and I believe your survey, the climate survey, does not have open-ended questions?
Correct.
Okay, but ours does have open-ended questions.
Good.
So let's, maybe getting back to the surveys, as was discussed. What I did is I looked at the input that received from the board members, and Kathy did a really good job about combining all that. So the question is this, do you want someone to go ahead and cull that number down or reduce that number
Yes.
to a certain number?
Yes.
Okay, because right now there are about 14 responses. That's in here. Ms. Tompkins, I believe they have the original one that we sent out, and then there was another set of them in here where we have lowered, where the board input has been put in those.
Okay.
So,
It was on your desk underneath the new agenda.
yeah, they're all pretty long. They all have about 14 responses. And and the directions originally said pick 3, but I think with that many responses, we probably should pick 4. But when I went through them all, I tried to identify the ones that I heard you talk about, plus take the ones that the board members suggested, and then there were 3 items that were not on there that I thought we should add. And I don't
I
mind.
think there's too many.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So, but the question is,
That's been coned down.
This is coming, especially the second one, like the excellence, I mean.
I know, they were reduced, but there's still a lot of them, I think too many. So the question is,
I don't know how you, I had a hard time picking, like, I mean, it just gets too much.
my suggestion would be that you empower someone to sit down with us, to come down with maybe no more than 10 in each category and pick 4. And whoever that might be, it might be a board member, it might be superintendent, it might be whoever you would like, to try to reduce that number. Where
Kathy
people select
heard from
4.
most of us, walked us through it. So this is where I go back to Mr. Robinson's element, because a lot of these are character attributes in a lot of ways. And so even trying to select from what had been provided to us, I was like, well, all of them are good. I mean,
That's the thing, all of them are important.
right, but when you put them together, I mean, they come.
A few are repetitious, when I went through there,
Yeah.
a few are repetitious.
Yes.
So if you would like, I'm open for what the board would like to do. You want to empower someone to work with us, to bring it down and then get it back to the board before they're out, because it would be any way the board would like to do it.
I think Dr. Kingsley would be helpful. See, when you talk, you get people to call on you. I think Dr. Kingsley would have some, and maybe our executive directors of various different aspects would be helpful in working with the superintendent on this. I'd be happy with that.
I agree. Dr. Denise Garvelupo.
Okay.
Yep.
And then what we want to try to do is get down. Now, I had 3. Let me tell you the ones
Chris
I
and
thought should
Jody,
be
that's to be
added.
next.
Wait. Come on, guys.
Okay, one was under personal leadership qualities, I had available and accessible.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, under instructional excellence and leadership, visit schools, classrooms, and district departments regularly.
Yep.
Okay, no instructional people are going to like that. And then the last one I had, which under board, staff, and community relations, provides timely follow-up on responses to questions and concern from the board and community.
Yes, that's a good one.
Todd never responded back to me.
Okay, those are ones that I didn't see in there, but I knew they were priorities of the board.
Yeah,
Yes.
they are.
Past working with this board.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay,
Yes.
so Mrs. Kingsley and,
Go 5 days without Dr. Kingsley.
Dr. Cantalupo.
right, okay, and at this meeting, maybe we can get together and we can do that. And they'll kind of call this number down when we all squared away. Okay, got it, okay. Excellent.
No more than 10.
No more than 10 from each one, all right? And we'll continue the open-ended on
Or
that.
less than 5.
Okay, good. All right. What else is on this agenda? Look at it here.
Okay.
Okay, I'm looking through here, the brochure. Okay, what's happening on that is Jody suggested, which I think is a really good idea, the cabinet's going to look through this because some of these things, we won't have some of the information until after we get the community input. But there is some information like about the district facts, and things like that that everyone can work together on to get everything together. We'll have everything on the back page. Back page is kind of our stuff, which we'll after we finalize it. So we'll have that going. But everybody liked the format kind of that we did last
Yeah,
time.
it's a good format.
Okay?
Yeah, I think Jody and Chris would be wonderful for reviewing those things.
All right, good. All right, so I think that completes our agenda.
He doesn't get...
But except for the final items, that'd be member comments.
I think you've got them all the way through.
John?
Madam Chair, if I could.
Yes.
Just to jump back to our advisory committee meetings, we are going to put in this possible third date if needed. But I will say, with me sending the completed applications out as soon as this committee is identified, and I do it on a regular basis, in our last 3 to 4 searches, the committee has completed their task in 2 meetings, and it is really interesting that when we come back for the second meeting, we have a matrix of each committee member and the candidates at the top, and each committee member goes through and basically checks the number that they think should move forward. It is not a required number of 10. It's not a required number of 5. It's how many folks do you think need to go forward to the board for their further consideration. In the last 4 searches that we've done, we've had about 4 to 5 applicants who get above 85% of the committee's vote. Those are 4 or 5 we know are going forward. Typically then you will have 2 or 3 that may be a little distance apart from the top, say, 5. Most committees have said the board needs to see these folks as well. Then after that group, you have a pretty lengthy, wide window before the next group of persons surface. And I think because they get the applications early, they take the electronic applications and start their little sheet of paper that says this is a must, this is a maybe, this is a maybe not. So I think the process with them getting them early
It's helpful.
helps a lot,
Yeah.
but we will build in the third meeting if needed.
Okay.
Great.
So the only thing, are we going to touch on the Citizens Advisory Committee tonight?
We can talk about it because that's something that you need to
Well,
be thinking about.
we
Right?
have another meeting scheduled for y'all to discuss it, and then a meeting to finally approve it. But
Okay.
certainly if the board would like to discuss it, that's certainly fine.
Well, I have a list of people. If anyone contacts me and says that they're interested in serving on the Citizen Advisory Committee, I have them contact Kathy. So I have a list from people that have contacted Kathy. So I don't know how we're going to decide who is going to sit on the Citizens Advisory Committee. So I'd like some clarification on that.
Okay. Typically, boards have approached it in 2 ways. They have said, as a body, we feel that there are 10 organizations that we must have represented. We must have the chamber, we must have this group, we must have this group, we must have a foundation representative, we must have a union rep, we must have NAACP, we must have the PTA, and they come up with 8 or 10 organizations that the board as a total body feel they should be on this group. Then they would ask that organization to identify a person. Then for the remaining, say, if the board were to pick 10, then the board could pick then 3 just at-large persons that you would want to be on this committee. That would give you 15 plus 10, 25. We've had committees that have gone from, say, 12 to 32 or 33. The other ways boards have done it is to simply say each board member will pick 5 individuals from the community or from employee groups, if you want employees on this, and that is your 25 member.
What I was concerned about is that if we say that X foundation should be included, and each one of the board members is allowed 5 candidates, we could have 5 members from one foundation sitting on the board, which wouldn't be too good.
Right.
So that's why I'm asking the question, because I wouldn't want to see that happen, because it'd be an overpowering of one entity over the others.
Right. And Ms. Zucker, what has happened in those cases that they have gone to the clerk to the board, and then once all names are kind of submitted at the second meeting, then the board will look and see the total list and then adjust appropriately.
Okay. As long as no one has ownership that they can't give up. That's where the problem comes in.
I would like to see, because I don't.
Wait, Eric is first. Eric?
Yeah, I think we should each be able to come up with 5 members, and all the foundations are so small that if Ms. Zucker wanted somebody from the Gulf Coast Community Foundation, and then I called up the Gulf Coast, John Thaxton's going to say, I already talked to Caroline, and you move on. I mean,
That's just my
right,
concern.
Right, I understand. I just think that most of our foundations are so small. Most of the groups in Sarasota County are so small. The likelihood that we have 5 people from one foundation, none of them knew, is just statistically highly unlikely.
But if we don't say that we want someone from the foundation, they could designate someone. If we don't get the top person, or they could designate someone, and you could.
Well, I was saying that we each pick our own. We each come up with 5 names. That's what I think option 2 is best. Because the problem is, once you start saying the chamber, okay, what about the Venice and Northport Chamber? And once you start picking foundations, what about you're going to leave people off? I mean, when we start defining groups, that means you're excluding groups, and that just creates a whole nother. I'd rather we just had 5 people, and then we're all adults and we all pick 5 and go from there, instead of having a selection process through exclusion, having a selection process through inclusion. And I just think that would be a more successful formula.
I just want to make sure that, not the chambers, but I want to make sure that the Jewish population's represented, the Hispanic population's represented. I mean, and the black population is represented. That's what I would like.
What you can do is if you use the option where each board member selects 5, you could always add people if they're, taking that into consideration and go up to 30. If you would like to do that, to make sure everybody is included, that you'd like to do it, if you'd like to do that. The other thing you have to think about is, do you want this to be an external committee, or do you want it to be internal? And because some boards feel like this is Citizens Advisory Committee, it should be external to the organization, and others feel there should be members from internally. Like a Teacher of the Year, for example, and some boards even have a student. And the students have been very successful on it too. So these are things.
Can it be a combination of both?
Yes, absolutely. If you could, you don't want to overload it with one, but those are some different things. We just want you to be aware of all the different possibilities.
Mrs. Brown?
Well, I like the idea of having that list of so many people that we need to have on the board that we know that they're going to get on, like the head of the NAACP and some of these other groups. Make sure that we get them on there. And then, I don't know that we each need, I think if we make sure that those people are on there, and if you want to make sure somebody from every chamber is on there, we can do that too. I don't know that they would want to, but I don't know that we all need 5. That's going to get to be an unwieldy group. I would say maybe board members pick 3, and we have the 5, the 10 or so, 10 to 15 that are picked from that list that we come up with. Well, anybody that you feel should have been on that list that isn't on that list, you will have 3 people to find to put on that list.
Well,
I don't remember putting anybody on the list last time. I mean, I didn't get input at all on who was on the community list last time.
right, there you go.
I did. I know I did. Mrs. Goodwin.
Sorry.
Well, I've been compiling a list because I was told not to do anything with it yet, so I just have a little list, and it's not a long list, but these are people who have asked me to be on.
That's what
And I think the same thing
that's why I
goes.
did it formally.
Yeah, but one of them, runs an organization in the county that I think would be, and some of them are community leaders and so forth. So I think it might be a good mix of both. Maybe we need to have 7 or 8 partners in the community that we want to make sure are represented. And then the rest, we would come up with maybe 3 people each or something like that. Maybe we do a combination of it.
I think you have a good start right now by sending your names into Mrs. Tompkins and maybe clarifying what maybe either organization or their background is. And then she can be circulating that around and you can see, if there's anybody missing and a board member could do that. So,
Do we have it?
Yeah, I was going to say that I think it will organically be diverse. It will organically reflect the myriads of people who are involved in this community at various sections, especially for up to 5. You're also assuming everyone can necessarily make these days. We don't know that. So, and people have already reached out to many of us, which I love. And so if we want to keep sending them over to Kathy, and then we come with the list and we add whoever we want if they're available, and then we come to the next meeting and move on.
So send them
No?
to Kathy.
I think 5 works, because then if you want a specific organization or someone to represent that, you as a board member can pick that of the 5. And then when we look at the list and say, oh, we're missing some, whatever, I think starting with just, we're going to try to each own 5, but then come together at the end and make a final one.
Mr. Robinson.
I agree. A lot of people, they can't tell out in the audience, but we're a rather diverse group up here. And we have a diverse group of friends and diverse group of places we go. I do want to bring up one issue about having people internally is in the community forum, every single person except one person did not include Todd Bowden in their top 3, and that person happened to be the spouse of a principal. And so that caused some, I would just be cognizant of they're rating the person who could eventually be the boss, and putting those people in that situation is problematic. And the fact that one spouse was the sole person on the community forum who didn't pick Todd Bowden in the top 3 was problematic too. And so I like the diversity of having internal candidates, but putting them in that type of position afterwards, could be extremely problematic for those people.
This was some boards have made that decision. They said it puts the person on the Citizens Advisory Committee in an awkward situation, especially if they're internal applicants on that.
Okay, so while we're here, what is the will of the board?
We each pick our 5.
No, so we don't want. No.
If you want to pick an internal person, I'm just telling you.
But I like what you're saying.
Yeah.
So how do we?
I'm not going to pick an internal person because I was there when I saw what happened. So.
Okay.
Each person
But it's up
picks
to you.
5.
Okay.
Each person picks 5.
Each person picks 5.
I'm just sharing my experience.
No, I appreciate it.
Okay.
Do you know who that was?
Okay. Also, board members, I know several of you have reached out individually to Andrea, John, or I. If you have any questions or anything, we were able to pull this calendar together because of input from a lot of people, and we appreciate that. And throughout this process, we're always available. So I think we again accomplished an awful lot tonight, and we're going to be working with Mrs. Kingsley and
Dr. Catalupo.
Dr. Enlupo, correct.
Dr. Denise.
Dr. Denise, right. Her name came up in our previous meeting as the person that would be really good, too. So
Oh, when you're talking about people really good, she comes up in all those meetings.
To help us with this
She
survey.
has so much free time.
Thank you all very much.
Thank
Is that it?
Appreciate
No staff's going to attend a school board meeting anymore. Good job, Art.
I'm amazed that you were able to do this. I did not think we'd get through all this. You guys deserve a hand.
Good job.
You really do. Thank you. Did a great job.
We're adjourned.
We are adjourned.
Meeting starts at 6.
Think I can-